All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to our February YouTube Live. Really want to take a quick thanks and say thank you to everyone who's joining. If this is your first time joining our YouTube Live, thanks for joining. And if you guys are back for more, thanks for coming back. These YouTube Lives are a lot of fun for me. And looks like we'll have a good crowd tonight. I already see a few familiar names in the chat. So if you guys are watching live right now, you'll be able to see what everyone is chatting in the live chat. It'll be on the right-hand side, or if you're on mobile, you should be able to scroll down to the bottom, I think, and click on live chat, and that's where you can see live chat. So hopefully I'm coming in loud and clear, and if you guys can't hear me right now, feel free to chime in the live chat and let me know where you're coming from and how long you've been driving for Uber and Lyft. So I see that we've got Mike from Kansas City. He just started driving for Uber. Steve is here from Salt Lake City. So welcome, Mike and Steve. Martin, welcome. Steven, definitely see some familiar names. So appreciate you guys all coming back on. And, if this is your first time joining, we typically will go over a couple of the top news stories for a few minutes in the rideshare industry, some things that we've seen in the past month. And I'm also going to talk about a couple app updates. So this month, I think there's only one app update that I saw personally with, but there may be more that we can discuss. And then we'll spend a majority of the time doing questions and answers. So everything that you guys have questions about, I'm here to answer, and I'll try to get to everyone that I can. I know we might have some tax questions coming in since it is tax time. So if you guys have any tax questions, I'm ready for that. And I'll also make sure to link out to any of the kind of, anything that I mention in the chat or anything like that. So stay tuned for that. If you guys can make it all the way to the end, I've got a copy of my book. We'll be giving away a few copies of my book tonight. So make sure you stay tuned to the end of the YouTube Live. I want to give a quick shout out to our winners from last month's YouTube Live giveaway. Looks like Murad, Raymond, and Donald, they all won a book. So if you guys are here in the live chat, feel free to chime in and let me know that you got the book okay, and just so everyone knows that I'm not hoarding all of these books for myself and reading them every night to put me to sleep. So hopefully everyone is in here, and it looks like we've got a bunch of people joining. So let's see, I saw Christopher says, anyone know if I can watch this while sitting with Maestro running? Yes, you should be able to do that. Sounds like Chris is actually out driving and taking a little break to watch our live chat, or maybe not taking a break, in between rides. So thank you. And then Pugad says, hit the like button. Yes, that would definitely be great if you guys can hit the like button if you're enjoying this video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. That way we can kind of get the word out to other drivers. But yeah, I want to start off talking about a couple of the top news stories that I've seen in the past week, in the past month. And, I think one of the big stories that maybe isn't as directly relevant to drivers, but it will be important going forward with Uber and Lyft IPOing in 2019 is, Uber reported a $1.8 billion loss kind of ahead of this IPO that's coming up. So it was pretty crazy to me, if you guys think about it, right? Like Uber is almost a 10-year-old company at this point, and they're still losing. Like, I think they had this tax windfall, but they would have lost $1.2 billion in the fourth quarter of 2018. And I think that as drivers, you might have seen this in the forms of, like weekly incentive bonuses or discounts to riders, and then a whole number of other costs. So, I think that's one of the crazy things is that, as drivers, obviously we complain, like Uber is taking this huge cut. But when you look at it, Uber is actually still, even though they take a huge cut on a bunch of rides and they're switching to like this new model of surge pricing, they're actually still losing a lot of money. So I thought that story and that's definitely just interesting in general. So we'll keep an eye on the company's profitability. I don't know how much it means for drivers right now, but definitely something to keep an eye on. And then the other story that I saw that was interesting is that basically there was this kind of story that came came out about Instacart, and we'll have an article up on the rideshareguy.com this week about it. But it was basically like Instacart kind of got busted for stealing. Well, I wouldn't say stealing, but kind of like very loosely playing with the rules when it came to tips. So they kind of had this $10 minimum payout, and if the customer tipped $10, then they were paying out nothing to the shopper because their minimum was $10. Whereas if the customer tipped $0, then they would make up for that $10. So they're sort of using tips to bolster their kind of pay to drivers. And I think this is something DoorDash has been doing for a long time. Instacart kind of got called out for this and actually reversed their policy. So definitely kind of an alarming trend in the delivery space. I'm curious to know how many of you guys, I'll throw it over to the audience right now, are driving delivery right now. Are you guys doing rideshare primarily? Comment from Talal that says January and February have been very slow. And yeah, I think we typically do see a slowdown in January and February. They kind of call it the winter slowdown. But that's one option, to kind of combat that, is to add delivery services. So you can definitely look into that. I mean, obviously, if you guys have seen any of my videos in 2018, I did a bunch of bird charging too. So that's another option. So I think there's definitely options to kind of supplement your income at times when it's slow. So, there's not a whole lot you can do sometimes if you go out and there just aren't any trips. But this is also a good time to experiment. So definitely, kind of think about supplementing. Lorraine Adams says, I have a small rideshare market, so I supplement. Looks like we've got Rideshare Genius in here. He's got another good YouTube channel and he's contributed a bunch of videos on our channel. He says that DoorDash has been offering as much as $8 bonus per delivery lately. And I actually, that's a good point, because I was chatting with one of our delivery guys, Dash Bridges. He kind of blogs over at the rideshareguy.com and covers all the delivery services. And he was sending me messages of that very thing that Rideshare Genius, Ezra, said, $8 bonuses. That's on top of the earnings and on top of tips. So I think, one of the nice things about the winter months is when it is kind of cold and rainy, people tend to order a lot more food. So this is something you can definitely take advantage of. And it actually looks like we've got quite a few. Allison says, I stopped delivery. It's not worth it. The Chuck Taylor says, I've done Uber Eats, but those are few and far between. Claudia says, I'm a DoorDasher too. And, one interesting strategy I've heard from drivers who do UberX and Uber Eats is that, at the end of a shift, for example, right, you can always set your destination filter to go home. But let's say that you're ending the night already near your house, right? Or you don't want to get a long trip. One way to sort of not get a long trip is actually to switch over to Uber Eats, because that with delivery, you're going to typically stay in within a few mile radius. So that's one strategy that I've heard of from UberX and Uber Eats drivers that you can definitely try out. So I Heart Cryptoverse says you have to be in a major city with a large airport to make money. And I mean, I think definitely, there are cities like San Francisco and LA where you can make more money. But remember, there's also a higher cost of living in those cities. So I don't know that I completely agree with that, but definitely something to keep in mind. And it looks like, the other, kind of the main app update that I wanted to talk about before we get into the full question and answer section, I sort of already started it, but is this new Surge. So new Uber Surge is a very controversial topic. And, frankly, most drivers are not big fans of it. We don't have it here in the LA market yet, but it did get rolled out to a bunch of new cities this past week. So Air Attackers in Cleveland, Ohio says, I'm doing rideshare with Uber and Lyft. I just got the new Surge. It just arrived in Cleveland. And I've actually been getting quite a few emails from drivers this week in various cities all across the country, because Uber just rolled out new Surge to a bunch of cities. So I just left a link in the live chat where you can actually go and read our article about it. And I believe we've got a video too. I should also mention, if you guys are watching this after the fact, you can always leave a comment below. You can still view the live chat, but you won't be able to chime in, obviously. But you can leave a comment and I'll respond or answer your question there. But Backseat driver says, I've had it for months and months. New surge, there are secrets. So we're starting to hear, I would say overall, the feedback from drivers with new surge. And if you guys aren't familiar with this new surge, it's a system where instead of paying drivers a multiplier, so 2x or 3x, for example, when you get a 2x surge ride, you would now get double the fare. They basically pay you a guaranteed amount. So instead of 2x, it might be a $4 bonus or it might be a $6 bonus. And the way it works is once you get into one of these new surge areas, you're guaranteed that bonus for your next trip. So, it kind of eliminates, in the past, for example, you would drive into a surge area and maybe you wouldn't get a ride and it would fall back down to regular pricing. Now, you are kind of missing out on those really huge fares, but that's never going to happen to you with a new surge system. So that's kind of how Uber designed it. And it looks like we've got a couple people chiming in. Please tell me more, backseat driver. Apparently, he's got some secrets. So hopefully he'll share that with us and let us know. Chuck Taylor says we have new surge in Dallas. And iHeart Cryptoverse says Uber can be charging 4x and paying drivers $5. So that's really kind of one of the major downsides of this new surge system is that there are going to be rides where Uber is charging a high surge amount to the passenger, yet we don't know exactly, like, are they guaranteeing $4 if it's a 4x surge, or are they guaranteeing $15 if there's a 4x surge? And I think that's like one of the biggest problems with this new surge system is that there's not a lot of transparency in how their algorithm works. Kind of very similar to like a lot of the issues with upfront pricing that we've talked about, where some passengers will get charged $100 and then on certain rides you might only get $50, right? Uber takes a 50% commission. That sucks. On other rides like Uber Pool, if you guys have ever looked at your trip receipts on Uber Pool, sometimes Uber actually loses money on those rides. So that's something to keep in mind. Peter says in a short trip, you may get more with the multiplier. And yeah, that's really kind of at a high level how new surge works is on shorter trips. Or kind of basically you're going to get more with the multiplier versus a longer trip where in the past, you would get 2x or 3x. Now you're just getting that fixed amount. So that's actually like a really good way to sum it up. Shorter trips, you do better. Longer trips, you make more. And, I don't want to go too off tangent, but you guys have probably seen Uber's rebalancing rates, or, what they call rebalancing rates, lowering the mileage, the per mile rates in a lot of cities over the past year and increasing the time rates, which again is, for now, those shorter trips in traffic, they pay you more. But for the longer trips, you make less. So Uber's trying to kind of like smooth out the earnings, but I guess you kind of have to trust them that they're going to do a good job of that and not skim anything off the top. But if you remember my comment earlier, right, they lost $1.2 billion last quarter. It's kind of hard to imagine they're not going to be taking money off the top. So definitely sort of something to keep in mind. And, so we spent about 15 minutes going over the top news stories and some of the latest app updates. I do want to open this up now to questions from you guys, and I'm going to do my best to answer. I see a bunch coming in there, and I'm happy to do my best to answer. We'll go for another 45 minutes or so. And like I said, if you guys stay to the end, I'll have a little giveaway, and we'll give out a few copies of my book. So definitely stay tuned for that. The first question I want to answer is from Rideshare Genius. Okay, you get another answer, Ezra. He says, how will IDG in New York respond to a change in surge there? I think I know the answer to that. I think they'll be pretty pissed. So this is the guild that sort of organizes on behalf of New York Uber and Lyft drivers. Since there are a lot of full-time drivers there, they've done a really good job of organizing, and they've passed actually, or had a hand in passing a lot of legislation. And I imagine that they would kind of fight this bitterly. So we'll see. I don't think it'll be coming to New York anytime soon. Steven says, trust them, LOL. Yeah, in reference to Uber. I'm curious to know from you guys, like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how trustworthy do you think Uber is, with 5 being the most trustworthy and 1 being the least trustworthy? That'll be kind of like a little mini poll that we'll do right now. So how trustworthy do you think Uber is? 5 is most trustworthy, 1 is least trustworthy. Let me know and I'll share the results here. Or feel free to chime in right now in the chat. Backseat driver, okay, he comes back and he says short pool on high surge is what does it say? Is it gold these days? So Basically, what he's saying is that these short pool trips on a high surge. If you're in this new surge system, right, you really want to rack up as many trips as possible. So this is what I've been hearing from drivers on the new surge, right? You kind of have to change your strategy a little, right? Now you want pool trips and you want multiple passengers, right? Going short distances. You can't always control that, but each trip now gets you a bonus. So it's sort of like Uber's Quest that is like a trip based bonus. So that's kind of how you have to think about it there. DF says his strategy is to drive into, then out of the airport queue when surging. And then you'll go drive in a regular area and still get the surge without waiting for an airport pickup. So it looks like some of the results are in. I see really quickly zero for my poll of how trustworthy Uber is. 0, -1, 1, 1, 1, 2 ones, a lot of ones and twos. I see 1, 3, -1. That wasn't even on my polling system. R. Weinstein does say a 5 though. So R. Weinstein, I'd be curious to know, how long you've been driving, and maybe tell me a little bit more why you feel 5. I'm happy to share that. Um, and let's see, Steven says, what happens if you frequently decline Uber Pool? So the nice thing is that you can't be deactivated for ignoring Uber Pool requests or really ignoring any type of request, right? When you get an accept screen come up and it says Uber Pool passenger or whatever, you can always ignore those, and nothing bad will happen. If you do ignore 2 to 3 in a row, though, in certain markets, they will put you on what's called like a timeout, or you can't get new trip requests. Basically, maybe they think that they don't want you to be online just sitting there and not taking requests. So they put you on timeout. But I've heard that you can log off and log in or go into airplane mode and then, go back on and get around it that way. So that's something that you can try. Allison says, how can Uber justify making more in a trip than the driver does? This happens on short trips often. So, yeah, I mean, Allison, if you think about it, right, on a short trip, Uber takes a fee right off the top. In some cities, they call it like the trust and it used to be called the trust and safety fee, but they take like a $2 fee right off the top. So on a minimum fare for a passenger that might be like $7, they take a $2 fee right off the top, and then there's kind of like $5 left over, right? And this is what they're charging the passenger, right? And then usually, like in the past, they would pay the driver 75% of that. Now they pay the driver based off mile and time. But if you kind of use that old pricing, you can see that basically on shorter trips, Uber takes close to a 40 to 50% overall commission because of that fee that they take on every trip. So that's why their fees are so high there. So we actually have a good infographic um, that I'll share about their commission that kind of explains that in a little bit better terms. So I'll leave that in a link in the live chat. You can take a look at that if you're curious. Let's see, what other questions do we have coming in? Kevin says, we still don't have Uber Pool in Dallas. That's interesting. I'm surprised Dallas doesn't have Uber Pool. I know, for example, in Orange County, so I'm in Los Angeles. We definitely have had Uber Pool for a while, but Orange County does not have Uber Pool. Backseat driver says only decline base rate pools. Steve says he rates Uber a 5 in trustworthiness. Uber is completely trustworthy for sure. And by the way, I will tip you in the app. So obviously, if you guys know he's being facetious, he's kidding around. It is funny though. I think I mentioned that on a prior YouTube live. Whenever you have a passenger that says, "Oh, I'll leave you a big tip," or "I'll tip you in the app," right? Of course, what happens? They never leave you a tip. So Michael has a question. Where do I go to print my 1099 wages for 2018? So looks like we've got our first tax question of the session. And then first off, I'm going to leave a link. Michael, I'm going to leave a link to my tax guide that we wrote on the rideshareguy.com that has all the information you need. We'll have a video coming out soon with sort of like all the tax information that you might need. But for the most part, to answer your question, is Uber and Lyft will send you a 1099, but you want to look at your tax summary, and that's actually going to have the gross amount that they paid, and that gross amount is actually what they charge passengers. So you need to subtract their fees and commissions in order to get your net amount, and that's really what you should be paying taxes on. So like I said, we've got all that information laid out in examples and stuff. So just make sure though that you kind of take a look at that, because you don't want to overpay on your taxes. And I think a big, kind of my number one tax tip for you guys going into this year is just make sure you do a good job tracking your mileage. I think that Uber and Lyft do provide mileage, but if you're driving for both services, you might have some crossover where you're online for both Uber and Lyft and it won't be accurate. And then, of course, there may be miles if you're going and meeting up with other driver friends, or if you're commuting at times to or from home and you don't have the app on. Those miles won't be counted on Uber and Lyft summary. And, let's say you're driving to the Uber vehicle inspection lot. Those are miles you want to track. So there's lots of miles that you kind of want to track outside of when you're online with the Uber or Lyft app. And that's why I recommend a mileage tracking app. I just left a link to Stride Tax, which is one of our affiliate partners. So if you sign up with that link, it's actually the app I recommend right now, since it's free, iPhone or Android, and it does a really good job tracking all of your miles. So you can definitely use that if you find it helpful. Let's see. Peter says DoorDash is sued for not giving tips to driver. Yeah, so I touched on that at the beginning of the YouTube live in case you missed it. Steven says Uber pool riders should not be able to rate or file a report. So I assume you're meaning that, obviously the riders get to rate at the end of every trip. But yeah, I know Uber pool riders can be a little bit of a hassle. Looks like we've got Dustin is driving. Did you change your YouTube name? He's another good YouTuber. If you guys want to go check out his channel, maybe not right now. Don't leave my YouTube live to go watch his videos, but maybe after you're done watching my YouTube live, you can go check on his channel. Steve says, Harry, have you ever heard any rationale for why our tips are limited? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Whatever customers tip in the app, they do, you get that as a driver. I did see we're working on an article right now. This study came out around the New York City issues, and they kind of like analyzed and crunched a bunch of numbers in New York City. And this is only for New York City, but I was really surprised to see that Uber passengers last year in New York City, before I tell you what it is, I'm curious to know what percentage of riders on Uber do you think tipped their driver? And I'll let you think about that for a second. And the answer is actually 2%. So super low. I was really surprised. And I think it's because I definitely know my tips are higher here on Uber than 2%, but I feel like maybe New York, I don't know, maybe they've got a little bit of a stereotype that they're a little tougher, angrier, I don't know, whatever stereotypes you want to say. So maybe they tip less. But yeah, I saw a stat in this study that said that Uber passengers in New York only tip 2% of the time. Lyft, though, they tip 4%, which is not that great, but it is double Uber. So I thought that was interesting. I'm curious to know what percentage you guys think. It sounds like Backseat Driver says 5%, Rideshare Genius says 58%. No way, buddy. Way too high. So yes, this is, oh yeah, Lorray asked, is that in the app? Yes, this is in the app, right? Obviously some passengers, I still get cash tips here and there. There's a few casinos here in Los Angeles, and I love picking up people at casinos because if they won, and sometimes even if they lose, I get a little tip, because they kind of have cash right there and it's handy. So that's a little hack, if you don't mind picking up people at casinos. Let's see. Steven says I'm getting 10 to 12%. I think Steven, are you in New York, Steven? Let me know. But yeah, it is. Mario says yes, tips in Boston are low as well. Alan says the reason why I don't work for tips. But I think also, just because tipping is low, I do think that there's areas where, if you're spending money to get tips, let's say you have like waters and candies and stuff like that, I don't think that makes sense, right? If the tipping percentage is that low. But let's say you can like invest in a few things like a charging cable or, I don't know, some kind of something that provides an additional benefit that's kind of like more of what I think of as an investment, then now you're standing out from every other Uber and Lyft driver. So that's kind of why I always, my number one piece of advice for new drivers is actually to go take a ride, because you'll sort of see like what are those things that I can do or that I can provide that aren't going to put a dent in my budget, but do make me stand out from other Uber and Lyft drivers. And like a charging cable is the most basic example. Like everyone gets one with their phone, so just sort of having it there, on hand or whatever you might be. But I love when people sort of get creative or think outside the box on that. Let's see. I Heart Cryptoverse says, "Do you ever get a casino chip as a tip?" I haven't, but I bet if I worked in Vegas, I might get casino chips, as tip, and which I would be happy to take. So that would be cool. Let's see what other questions we have coming in here. Alan says Lyft riders are more downscale in my city because Lyft accepts prepaid cards. And I think we actually talked about this on my last YouTube live. I've personally found that, people that like work more in the service industry or that maybe don't make as much money actually tip better than a lot of the rich people. So I wouldn't necessarily think just because you're picking someone up in a rich area that you're going to get a tip. I've actually found it to be the opposite. But Dustin says, "Come on, guys, 105 watching, only 16 likes." Yeah, definitely give me that thumbs up if you guys are enjoying this stream. Now we're up to 20. Thank you, Dustin. Because I think when you guys give a thumbs up, it notifies other people that they should come and watch. Alan says, "I have triple charge cables and aux cord and still get stiffed on tips." Yeah, I mean, it definitely is possible. To also think about, it didn't cost you much or barely anything at all to invest in those. So it can't hurt, right? Whereas if you were investing in like water or gum or candy or mints, you're like constantly having to replenish that. And that isn't nearly as good of a deal. Um, Let's see. Janet says, "I get tips on 30% of my rides, but I haven't calculated what percentage of my earnings." Prius. Okay, so John asked, "Does a Prius get better miles per gallon than the CT200 hybrid?" So I think you're talking about a Lexus CT200. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head, but I've ridden in a Lexus Coupe, the hybrid version. It's actually a pretty nice car. I don't know if it qualifies though for Uber Select, but if it does, there's some cars that are like, qualify for Uber Select, but aren't much more expensive than Uber X. If you have to buy like a really expensive car to do Uber Select, I don't think that it's worth it. But if you can find cars that are kind of like right on that borderline, like I saw one guy with a Mini Cooper, like a 4-door Mini Cooper that qualified for Select. There's definitely like some good little values that you can get there. Let's see. A lot of people provide charging cables. I mean, I think that's pretty basic. The Evil says, "I do charging cables, Lightning version, micro USB, and USB Type C for the newer Android phones. I just connect all the cables to the rapid charging hub. Definitely don't do water." I'm curious too. One thing we've found, some of the drivers that are using Cargo. So if you guys aren't familiar with this product, it's basically like a vending machine that you can put in the back of your car. One of the nice things I've heard, from drivers that are using Cargo is that, you do get paid some money for using the Cargo. I was in an Uber the other night and talking to the driver, and he said he was making around $60 a week with Cargo. But one other thing is that, since passengers are often getting free items, they sometimes leave tips because of that too. So you can kind of make money from Cargo, but also your tips could go up because you're now providing, amenities and free snacks and stuff like that to all of your riders. So let me see if they're another one of our affiliate partners. So I think we've got an affiliate link. I'll leave, if you guys are interested in signing up with Cargo, like I said, a lot of drivers are in that like $60 a week range. So it's not a ton, but it's not bad for just leaving a little box in there. And actually, this driver even told me, since you get paid for giving out these free items, he told me that sometimes he takes it to his church and just has a bunch of his church members scan the items. I don't know if that is something I would recommend, I could recommend, but I'm sure it definitely happens. So Janet says, I drive a Lexus 330h, but I'm Uber X. What does it take to be select? So usually on Uber, I don't know how new you are, Janet, but I think there's like a threshold now. I think you have to do 50 or 100 trips or something like that. And once you do that threshold for whatever your city is, you're now eligible for Uber Select. And then you can kind of just go for select rides, or if it's busy on Uber X or surging on Uber X, you can do Uber X and Uber Select. I'm going to be doing some Uber Select rides this year with my car, so definitely I'll have some more insight on that for you. Dan says both Uber and Lyft aren't responding well to drivers in 100% electric cars, EVs, like me and my Nissan Leaf. So it sounds like Dan is driving a Nissan Leaf, which, to be honest, Dan, I'm curious about your experience because I found the Leaf. I think the range is about 100 miles. Um, which is quite short for a rideshare driver. I think one of the best electric vehicle cars for rideshare drivers is the Chevy Bolt with a B, and it's got a 220-mile range. We actually just had one of our new contributors on the rideshare guy write a post about this. So I'm going to leave a link if you guys want to go read a little bit about what it's like. And this car is actually available through Maven. So Maven Gig is a platform where you can rent basically like rideshare, like a flexible weekly rideshare rental. And their fleet is primarily Chevy Bolt. So if you guys are interested in trying out an electric vehicle for rideshare, obviously no gas. They do offer free charging with Maven Gig, but I've heard that the charging stations are often busy or full. So you might have to charge it at home. I'll leave a link if you guys want to sign up with our link for Maven Gig, but they're in a bunch of cities now. And I really think that, I'm curious to see, to answer your question about the electric vehicles, you're right. I don't think Uber and Lyft have done anything to kind of support drivers with electric vehicles, but I saw a pilot from Lyft, for example. I know they're testing something. They've kind of, I don't think they're quite putting their money where their mouth is, but I'm really interested in the next year or two. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for drivers and electric vehicles, now that these cars have come down. And, obviously as drivers, we put a ton of mileage on our vehicles, but in addition to that, like electric cars have a lot lower maintenance costs. So that's the other nice thing is you can potentially not only save on gas, but you can also save on maintenance. I actually just got solar installed at my house, so now I've got the electric car and solar, and it's kind of a nice, saving the environment and saving some money. But yeah, I see a good question here from Janice. She says, I was deactivated and now I can't get my tax and income info. So I've actually heard this from a few drivers that have been deactivated or quit, or something happened to their account where they can no longer access their dashboard. And my first piece of advice is check your mail, because usually Uber and Lyft are supposed to send 1099s by mail in this case, if you've been deactivated or something like that, because legally they have to send you something. So check your mail, make sure you don't throw it away. And then secondarily, you should go into an Uber office and ask them about it, because they really need to provide you with this info. And then third, if you've tried everything and you just can't get it, the other kind of good way around this is to check your bank statements for last year. And because, Uber deposits every week, or if you use Instant Pay, it comes in as like a special code or tagged on your bank statements, and you can kind of add up all of the money that Uber paid you in 2018, for example. And then that way you can at least know the income. Now, it's not actually the correct way to do your taxes. If you read our tax guide, you'll see that you're supposed to take their gross minus their commission and fees to get your net. That net is actually what should show up when you add up all your bank statements, but you won't be underpaying taxes, which is really bad. So that's how I would go about that. Let's see. A lot of good questions coming in right now, so I'm going to try to answer some of them pretty quickly. Someone asked what Select is. So Uber X and Lyft Basic are kind of like the four-door sedan versions, but some cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco and a lot of others have a next level tier called Uber Select, and it's kind of more just like mid-luxury vehicles, so like Lexus, BMW, even like a BMW Mini Cooper, for example, like the nice four-door version qualifies. So there's a few. You can actually find that info on Uber's website, or we've got it on our site too. Let's see. Alejandro says, are there any new changes coming to the Lyft driver app? So Lyft actually made about, Uber and Lyft have actually been making a lot of small changes, I think, to their apps. Uber, released this big new driver app, and then they launched the Uber Pro program. But Lyft, I believe, they added something like 15 features that we wrote about on the blog, kind of small stuff, but I'll leave a link to that if you kind of want to read up on it. But, definitely one kind of positive trend I've seen is that these companies aren't necessarily raising rates and paying drivers a ton more, but they are kind of doing a lot of stuff around the edges, adding benefits here, improving the app there. So I definitely will say in 2018 they made a lot of small changes, and I don't know that they did the best job publicizing all of them, but they're definitely doing a lot of small to medium stuff. I don't think it's like the top things drivers care about, but they are making some changes. So check out that link and let me know what you think. Let's see what other questions. I saw something about a college. I can't find that one now, but feel free to ask again. Dan says 2019 Leaf is a 226-mile range. Wow, so it must have really increased, which is great. Because we have a guest post on the site from a few years ago from a driver who was doing a Leaf, and I remember he specifically said that the range was kind of brutal because it was so low. Steve says a late model Accord with leather interior will qualify as select in Utah. I'm driving a 2016 Toyota RAV4 Limited with leather interior on select. So that's a good point, Steve. There are a lot of cars that are kind of just like the high end of the more, what you would think like economical, like a Toyota RAV4, Honda Accord, like some of the higher end, or if you have leather or a newer model, it will actually qualify you for select. So one of the best ways is, just talk to drivers in your area, see what the requirements are in your city, go into the Uber office and ask them, take a bunch of select rides and kind of see what type of drivers and cars you get. So, a lot of options there, but you do kind of want to think outside the box a little bit there. Peter says, do you think Lyft will expand to Europe? So Lyft, they're primarily operating in the United States. They recently expanded to Canada. I really don't see them expanding to Europe anytime soon. It's sort of like a very different market there, and it's a lot more regulated. So, um, Chris says for Uber Eats new drivers, it says all you have to do is one delivery and make $100. It's right in the Inbox Dollars app. Never heard of the Inbox Dollars app, but Chris, if you want to shoot me an email, Harry at therideshareguy.com, I can definitely take a look at it and vet it. It does sound a little bit too good to be true off the top of my head. Jackson says, oh, Jackson, good to see you, man. I haven't heard from you in a while. Will the IPO rescue us from driverless cars? So I think like a lot of other drivers, I'm very skeptical of driverless cars. If you guys have ever ridden in a Tesla or ridden in, anything that's kind of like, doing kind of like autonomous or semi-autonomous driving, these cars are nowhere near like technologically where they need to be, in my opinion, to like actually go out and do rides. So, I think we're still many years away, and it's going to be really tough for them to get that last like 1%, that last 0.1%. And then they also have to think about like, how do they handle all those interactions with passengers, right? If you guys have ever picked up anyone, I mean, honestly, anyone, anywhere, right? Like think about all the times where your passenger couldn't find you. How are, self-driving cars going to find drivers or passengers in the future? Not that it can't be done. It's just they're going to have to build a lot more systems in place, right? If someone pukes in your car, do you think passengers are going to call Uber and be like, hey, I just puked in a self-driving car, charge me $100? No way. The next passenger is going to have to get into the car and spot it. I don't think Uber is going to want that either. Maybe they'll have to install cameras or sensors that detect puke. And like I said, all that technology is possible, but it's going to be a while before they get anywhere close to it. So that's kind of a long answer, Jackson, but hopefully that answers you. Tom says, this is kind of completely unrelated to rideshare, but he says, what stocks are good to invest in? So I invest most of my money whenever I have extra money or, kind of whatever my profits from the month. I usually actually invest it in pretty balanced index funds. But I do, as far as individual stocks, I do invest like a very small percentage of my portfolio just in companies that, I use or that I believe in or that I think are doing great. So like some examples would be like Amazon, Tesla, Apple, Lululemon, Domino's Pizza, just kind of random ones, but something like stands out to me and I'll put a little bit of money just to kind of own them. So let's see, what other questions do we have? Janet says, is there insurance for just the gap while seeking rides? So yes, definitely. I really highly recommend drivers get rideshare insurance, especially now that there's so many options. And honestly, most people haven't shopped around for car insurance in a few years. So I talked to a lot of drivers who, just by the nature of shopping around and getting multiple quotes for rideshare insurance, a lot of them actually end up saving money just because they haven't shopped around in so long. So I'll leave a link to our rideshare insurance marketplace, and you guys can actually go and talk to agents and see which options are available in your city. Peter says, why is Uber wasting money for self-driving cars? Well, that's the thing. They're kind of, I have heard, or it seems like they're toning down a lot of what they're spending. Now they're investing a lot more in like bikes and scooters and supposedly $1 million. Robert says Geico has full insurance for rideshare at a fair price. And yeah, there's actually a ton of options now. And that's the thing, like go out and get a few quotes, at least 2 to 3 quotes. And I bet you'll be really surprised. This rideshare insurance product has come down. There's kind of like no reason not to be covered. And then you don't have to worry about any of these issues. I get emails from drivers like, oh, I got into an accident. Now no one will cover me, right? It's just sort of, you got to take a little responsibility, when you guys are running your own business. So, and that's what rideshare driving is. It's running your own business, whether you realize it or not. So looks like we got our first super chat. So Martin, big thanks for the $5 super chat. He says, can I get a shout out to Mary, survivor of 28 brain operations for hydrocephalus and Uber or Lyft driver with an average of 4.8 stars. I can definitely give a shout out to Mary for that because it sounds like she's had a rough go, but if she's driving for Uber and Lyft and 4.8 stars, she's doing a great job. So feel free to email me with more information. Maybe there's a way I can help out, Martin, but I'd love to know more about that story. Jonathan says Farmers has good prices as well. You know what I found with rideshare insurance and insurance in general is that like everyone's like, oh, I love Geico. Oh, I love Farmers. Oh, I love Allstate. It's sort of like, I feel like the prices just vary so much is that like you really just want to get a few quotes. And frankly, like as long as you're going with like a company that, you've heard of their name before and they're giving you the cheapest price. I mean, to me, it seems like just go with the best option there. So it looks like R. Weinstein says, way to go, Mary. Steve Fisher, we're all pulling for you, Mary. So I appreciate my audience is all, have some good luck and best wishes for her too. So I appreciate that. You guys are all class acts. I very much appreciate that. I like to see that. So Steve says, I was promised a flying car at the Seattle World's Fair in 1962, and I'm still waiting. Autonomous vehicles are right there with them. And I couldn't agree more. I do think there are some industries though, like truck driving, for example, where, you're just driving a truck like for a long amount of time on a straight road. I could definitely see stuff like that potentially getting automated first. So what I would, if you're like worried or thinking about self-driving cars, I've got a good section about this in my book actually, but, what I would look to is when they start actually rolling out real self-driving cars, no human drivers in the car in certain, it's going to be in like certain areas or certain confined spaces or retirement villages and stuff like that. When that starts happening, I think we kind of know, all right, the technology is getting closer. Rideshare Revolution says, how will an automated car deal with an arguing customer? So good to see Rideshare Revolution, another great YouTuber from Chicago, does a lot of live streams, right? That's sort of your thing. So definitely recommend you guys check out his channel. But he has a good point is that, frankly, an automated car won't deal with an arguing customer. And I think that, what's funny now is that often customers these days don't interact with Uber and Lyft and their customer service very often because there isn't much for them to interact with because, they can talk to the driver. But in the future, that's another thing that like Uber and Lyft, they're gonna have to get their customer service way better because imagine like all these customers having issues. There's no one that they can talk to. They're gonna have no driver or anything like that. So real quick, I want to get in this other super chat. We got our first €5 super chat from iHeart Cryptoverse. I think €5 is actually better than $5. Hold on, let me convert this real quick. €5 to $5. According to Google, that's $5.67. So that's actually better than a $5 US super chat. So I appreciate that, iHeart Cryptoverse Big thanks for that. Love the super chats coming in. Steel City Driver says, Rideshare Revolution, the beardedest. I think he also says he's the best looking YouTuber or something like that. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that later. Rideshare Revolution also says, I'd be more worried about rideshare cars being piloted from outsourced countries. Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. Okay, so this was a question I wanted to answer earlier, but I think I missed it. R. Weinstein says, any more advice or strategy for driving in a college town? West Coast seems very different from Southeast Florida, average fare $3. So definitely, with the college towns, it's a little bit different game. I'm here in LA, so we've got a bunch of colleges locally, but we also have a ton of other crap going on. So I wouldn't by any means call it, a college town. But definitely, one thing that I think you just have to take advantage of in general, like understand your market, right? If you're in a college town, you need to be ready. Like when those college kids are coming back, like know the schedule, right? Like go to the college's website and figure out what's the academic calendar. When are they coming into town? When does this semester start? When does that semester start? You shouldn't be taking your rideshare vacation in the middle of like rush week, for example, because that's when everyone's going to be on campus and wanting rides and going to the bars and all that. So that's just the thing, there's still opportunity. You just kind of have to be smart about it. So that's kind of one piece of advice there. I'm curious to hear from you guys if you have any advice for this driver in a college town. And then, yes, for those of you who are wondering, that is my son in the background. I think he was crying. I'm going to have to soundproof the doors, but hopefully, I don't know, you guys tell me if it's loud or not. But I did hear him crying. Dan says, can we get the link to your guide, my book? Sure, I'll leave a link to my Amazon book. I don't really make much money, to be honest, if you buy the book, but it is a great resource. I think it's like $7 right now too, or even a few bucks on Kindle. And then of course, I'll also be giving away a few copies at the end. So definitely check that out. Peter says, or let's see, Steel City Driver says, Pittsburgh has 2 major universities in one neighborhood, lots of rides. So yeah, these college rides can definitely be lucrative. Of course, one thing too is Thursday nights are, I don't know about obvious, but Thursday nights are big party nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights. And, it wasn't that long ago that I was in college, but I do remember there are always specific bars and places that were kind of like, this was the go-to spot on Tuesday night. This was the go-to spot on Wednesday night. So definitely do a little research, talk to your passengers and, kind of understand what's going on in your market, especially in a college town. And I think you can, really take advantage of that. So looks like we've got Dave, the Uber slave, definitely another good YouTuber. And I think Dave has probably one of my favorite names for a YouTube channel out there. So his channel is Dave, the Uber slave. He just chimed in with a $5 super chat. Really appreciate that. He says, Jay Creator's videos give a lot of value. Thanks to both of you. So yes, Jay is one of our kind of main top contributors on the YouTube channel. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed his videos and definitely lots more. I've actually got a couple other contributors too that I'm talking to. So in 2019, you'll see me, you'll see Jay, you'll see Joe, and maybe even 1 or 2 others. So definitely stay tuned for that. I always like trying to bring, very different opinions from people who are doing small town driving to big town driving, making a lot of money, making medium, doing different services. So hopefully you guys can find someone that you can relate to. So definitely check out Dave's channel. I saw a couple good questions. Jeffrey says, what happens if you get a speeding ticket? I didn't get one, but I'm just curious. And I just looked, it's kind of hard to figure out like what Uber's exact rules are, but usually what I tell people, since it's like different for every state, but as long as you have less than if you have 2 tickets or less in the past 2 to 3 years. Some states it's 2 to 3 tickets or less, but in the past 2 to 3 years, you should be okay and you won't get deactivated, or you'll still be approved to drive for Uber and Lyft. That's kind of like my general rule of thumb. You really do not want to get more than 2 to 3 tickets in the past 2 to 3 years. So 1 ticket is okay. But yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And then, yeah, of course, Steel City says you either contest it or pay the massive fine. And, obviously I think you always want to go to traffic school and all that, so the points don't go on your record. Jonathan says, Jay's posts have been great and awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, we love having Jay around. I saw one question that was interesting. Steel City says, Harry, I'm trying to buy a Tesla Model 3. What are your tips? So I know that, actually, I know Rideshare Revolution has a good video about, I think he did a video on Tesla, and I just interviewed a YouTuber. He's a Tesla YouTuber who I'll pull up his video if I can find it. And basically, he kind of went out and drove for Uber more for fun than anything with his Model 3, but it was really interesting. I think the price point for the Tesla right now, it's like 40. The cheapest one you can get, I think, is $42,000, and then you get a $4,000 tax credit. So it comes at 38. I think it's a little bit too expensive. But that being said, it does qualify for Uber Select. So, they just dropped the price a couple times. They already dropped the price a couple times this year. So I haven't run the numbers, but I feel like it could actually make for a pretty interesting car on, Uber Select. And also, I guess you would probably drive it some on Uber X and Lyft, but I do feel like it would be interesting because if you get that base model, the price keeps coming down and down and down. Of course, you're not going to have any gas. If you have solar panels at your home, that can be really make the numbers work in your favor. If you have free charging in your area too, I think that's the thing. The charging isn't going to cost you a ton, but definitely if you have free charging, that can be a big impact. And then the thing that they sort of say with these Tesla Model 3s is that there's much lower maintenance costs. So really, there's no oil changes. There's nothing like that. You do still have to get kind of brakes and tires, but definitely, I think it's interesting. It might be actually a good article for me to kind of really explore that. Rideshare Revolution says no Model 3. And I guess one of the downsides too that he brought up in his video is that passengers won't know how to get into the car because it does have a weird door handle. But I saw my first driver here in Los Angeles actually, and I talked to him. He was doing Lyft and Uber in a Tesla Model 3. So it definitely, there's some people that are trying to do it. Backseat driver says Tesla is a maintenance nightmare. I haven't honestly heard that. But I think there's only one way to find out. Steel City says, are they charging you for using supercharging stations? Yeah, so you do have to pay for using a supercharging station with Tesla. It's only like about, I think I want to say like 8 or 10 to 15 bucks though for a full fill up, right? Like 300 miles. So it's definitely not bad. Let's see. I saw a couple questions. John says, I paid $5,200 in taxes last year on 40K or a little more Uber, Lyft, and caviar income in Pennsylvania. Is that a little high or no? It sounds a little high, to be honest. If you guys are full-time drivers doing 40, and kind of grossing, I guess you would say $40,000 to $50,000 a year after Uber and Lyft's fees, right? So that's the money that they would pay you basically. That's what I call your gross income, or that's what it's called on your taxes, at least. You should really be deducting the crap out of your mileage, right? Because you guys are putting a lot of miles on your car. So you really want to be doing a good job tracking your miles everywhere you go. Anytime you're going to the store to buy things for your rideshare car, doing car washes, track all those expenses. For example, I like to travel, or I used to before I had a baby, and I bought a GoPro so that when I traveled, I could do videos and stuff like that. But I also use the GoPro in my camera as sort of like a secondary dash cam at times. And the nice thing about a GoPro is that, let's say use it 90% for your business, 10% for your travel. Even though you really kind of bought it for your travel, as long as you're using it 90% for your business, you get to deduct 90% of that $300 GoPro. So there are a lot of expenses like that are kind of like shared expenses that you can kind of deduct in addition to your mileage. And, when you really start to get creative and think outside the box, I think you should be able to get your taxes paid a little bit lower to like the $2,000-3,000 range legally, of course. Don't go making stuff up, but I think that you can definitely do that. And of course, make sure you read our tax guide that I linked to earlier, or just type in tax guide, rideshare guy, and you should be able to find it. We also have a CPA that we recommend if you guys do have more complex taxes. His name is Joe Starzik. I've been working with him for 3 or 4 years. He's helped like hundreds of rideshare drivers. So he's a great resource that you guys can definitely take advantage of if you don't mind paying for a CPA. Martin says sporting events and rock stars bring in surge rates and gauge if there are too many drivers in town. I don't know if that's a question or more of a statement, but sounds like he's targeting sporting events and rock star, concerts and things like that, which is definitely a strategy. So real quick, we're going to go for about 5 more minutes and then I'll do the giveaway. So definitely if you guys have any last questions, I encourage you to get them in now. If you haven't given this video a thumbs up, please do so now. And that'll help, get the word out to other people so that they can watch this. And of course, if you guys are watching this after the fact, feel free to leave a comment down below. You won't be able to participate in the live chat, but you can leave a comment below and ask any questions that you might have or that we didn't get to, and I'll make sure to answer there. Janet says, can you deduct for your phone? Yes, 100%. Or sorry, not 100%, but yes, you can deduct for your phone. So you can always deduct anything that you use for your business, the percentage of time that you use it for your business. Now it's a little arbitrary, but let's say, you estimate that you're using your phone 75% of the time for business because you're online 8 hours a day, and then you use it 2 hours a day. And actually, even on iPhone, it tells you how much screen time you're using. So that might be a good way to break it down. But, if you're paying $100 a month, then you get to deduct a lot of that. So that's the nice thing. Let's see, what other questions do we have coming in? Jeff Mason says, I paid $2,500 in federal tax on 52K gross in 2018. Shimon says, hey, Harry, what's the deal with flat rate surge? Just changed in one more county in California. So they're in Fresno. He's in Fresno. Drivers are definitely getting stiff. So I think I actually talked about this a little bit earlier, Shimon. So you might need to rewind it and see where I talked about that. John says, thanks. I'm going to go the TurboTax route this time around. And yeah, so we surveyed drivers last year. Most drivers were using TurboTax. Some were using a CPA, and then others were using kind of like a, walk-in tax service, which to be honest, I don't really recommend. I think you should either use like a good software like TurboTax or H&R Block is sometimes a little cheaper, or a CPA. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but when I logged on to my Uber profile this year to check all my tax docs, there was actually an offer to file my taxes with TurboTax for free. So I would definitely check that out on your, kind of whatever it is, partners.uber.com, and see if you have that offer. I'm pretty sure it's available to every driver though. So definitely check that out. Defenestrator says, do you think Lyft will match Uber's rates per minute and minimum fare in LA soon? And I think that they definitely will. It's funny that you brought that up. I was talking to someone about this the other day because he told me that Uber was paying a little bit more than Lyft. And I was like, wait, are they? And yeah, I looked it up and I think you're right. I think the per mile is the same, but the per minute is lower and the minimum fare is lower. There's something like that. Something is the same and something isn't. But these companies always copy each other, so I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Lyft copied them there. Let's see. The XL specialist says, remind everyone to sign up for Sears Shop Your Way promotion for Uber drivers. I have earned over $300. So that's a good reminder. I'm pretty sure I actually haven't checked on the program in a while. I just sort of have it on like auto setup or whatever you would call it, where I just keep getting racking up cash. But I'll leave a link right now to the Shop Your Way program, a video we did, because that's definitely a program that drivers should be taking advantage of. Let's see. We've got a couple other questions. Shimon says, I really feel that LA might change soon to flat rate surge. And I agree. I think unfortunately Uber is really rolling this flat rate surge out to a lot of cities over time. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they do it, but I'll definitely hit the road when that does happen and see how it goes. Let's see. R. Weinstein says, thank you, Harry. You are a good egg. I appreciate that. All right, we'll do one or two more questions here. Yusuf says, Lexus CT200H on Uber Select or Prius on Uber X. I think it's a tough one. I bet they're about the same, but I think like you probably have more potential with a Lexus hybrid. Like I think if you really figure things out and you're really good, you could make more than that. But I bet on average, they're about the same. And then I saw another question. Larray says, I use QuickBooks Self-Employed and keep track of receipts. Another great service. Peter says, "Are you still driving frequently on Uber at the rideshare guy?" Yeah, definitely. I mean, my main business, my full time business now is running the blog and the YouTube channel and creating all this content, writing books and stuff like that. But I definitely, it's a nice thing about Uber and Lyft is that you can take a week off, you can take 2 weeks off. So I try to get out there, just to kind of stay up to date on the app and really kind of come up with a lot of ideas for content. Ace says, "Do you know your CPA's rate?" I don't, but he works with a lot of rideshare drivers, and that's why we kind of recommend him. So he is very reasonable. I'm sure it's like a couple $100. It's going to be more obviously than TurboTax or anything like that, but it's nothing crazy, And I am sure it depends on how complicated it is. Kenneth says, "What are your thoughts on letting a passenger sit up front?" So I like talking to passengers. A lot of passengers, especially in LA, they get into the back, they put their headphones on and go on their phone. Hey, whatever, I'm there to serve them. So whatever they want to do their thing. But, usually when I do have a passenger sit up front, and I still feel like it happens more often on Lyft than Uber, usually I kind of take that as a sign like, hey, they want to chat. What's really awkward though is when passengers sit up front. I don't know if you guys have ever had this happen to you, and then they don't talk. That's like weird. I don't know why people do that, but that happens to me once in a while. So you can definitely check that out. Chris, I don't have a Grubhub referral code, but thank you for asking. Damon says, "What do you think about Juno expanding to New Jersey? I just signed up for them and they will start at the end of the month. Their rates are higher than Uber and Lyft." I think definitely, this is one of the things I talked about earlier in the chat. If there's new companies or new opportunities, especially at the beginning, they tend to pay more and, have bonuses and things like that. So I saw Juno's expanding to New Jersey. I think I even signed up a few drivers for this. So I would definitely look to at least try it out and see what it's like. It can't hurt, and kind of see how things goes. So let's see. Air Attacker says, "Harry, I think this will be the last question I answer, but Air Attacker says, "Harry, do you have any thoughts on a way to teach drivers how to protect themselves against false claims and deactivations? I've come up with a system that I use." I think, like someone else said, feel free to email it to me, and maybe it's a good topic for an article or a video. But I think the best way to protect yourself is a dash cam. I like to think of a dash cam as kind of a cheap insurance policy. Obviously, it can record internal, external, like what's going on around you if you get into an accident. Excuse me, which can be really valuable if you get into a serious accident and you need to make claims for lost wages and all that. We actually have a lawyer that we recommend, who I definitely, I've interviewed, and I definitely recommend him if you get into a serious accident. But the nice thing about the dash cam, you might spend 100 or $150 on a decent dash cam, but it can also help you in the event that a rider says, I don't know, you molested them or that you were driving intoxicated. You've got that footage and you can always take it to Uber. It may not be that easy to get them to watch it. You might have to go like in person to an office and really argue with them, but you'll always have evidence of, you'll always have evidence of that, kind of incident, and you can take care of it that way. So that, I think, just about does it. Rideshare Dan says, "What do you think of cargo?" I think I actually touched on it a little earlier, but I definitely, it's not going to make you rich, but drivers are earning about 60, $70 a week, and I definitely recommend people sign up. So I think that we are going to go ahead and end right now, but I do want to do a little giveaway of my book. So for tonight's giveaway, I think, like normal, you'll need to email me. And I think tonight I want to know what's the best thing you guys have purchased for your rideshare driving, right? So we just talked about dash cam. So I want you to guys email me, harry@therideshareguy.com, subject line YouTube live, and then tell me what's the best thing you purchased for your rideshare driving. I'll pick out 3 of my favorite answers and send you guys a book, my new book. And, I'm curious to hear from you because, like I just talked about the dash cams, like I think a phone mount and a dash cam is essential. Joe, one of our contributors, actually just did a cool video, and it's like the one item that he loves rideshare driving, and it turned out to be a Bluetooth earpiece, right? Because he found that a lot of his passengers didn't want to talk to him, and so he started putting an earpiece in and listening to podcasts like for hours at a time while he was driving, and it kind of just made him help pass the time. At times it can be boring and all that, and of course it also helps with contacting your passengers and stuff like that. So don't steal any of my 3. I mean, you can steal one of those 3 if you want, if it really is something you guys feel is essential. But if you guys want to enter this contest, best, Harry at therideshareguy.com, and subject line YouTube Live, and tell me like what's your one thing, your best rideshare purchase that you think you made, or your favorite thing. I'm really curious to hear what you think. I already see some pretty interesting answers coming in. Pack a knife or get your concealed weapons permit, vomit bags, Audubon for smells. I don't know what that is, but I'm assuming it's some type of odor thing. Seat covers. These are all great answers. Honestly, we only get usually like maybe like 10, 20 people will enter these contests. You got a pretty good chance of winning a copy of my book. If you guys do want to email me, Harry at therideshareguy.com. So thank you everyone for joining. This was a lot of fun. If you haven't given this video a thumbs up yet, please do so. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that too. We release new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and even a bonus video on Sunday sometimes. I go live every single month, usually Tuesday, 4 p.m. Pacific, just like we did today. I've been going live for almost 2 years every single month. So it's something I'll be doing for a long time going in the future. I really love helping you, and I really appreciate, I just want to take 1 second. I really do appreciate all the support that everyone has given my channel and coming onto the YouTube Live. If you're sitting here for an hour listening to me talk, I really just want to say thanks. I think that our job, driving and transporting passengers around can be a little bit lonely at times, and, a little solitary, and you might not always getting, hear thank you from everyone. But I do want to just let you know that I thank you guys for supporting me and for the job that you're doing out on the road. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for supporting my channel. All right, enough of the sentimental stuff. I will see you guys next month. Take care. Stay safe.